Everyone for coming out. My name's Michael Murphy, and I worked on this project with my friend Niall McGurk. These projects, putting the book together, putting the fanzine together, putting this event together tonight, like there's a fair bit of chaos and there's organisation, and I tend to bring the chaos, so thanks to Niall for making everything happen. You know, like anyone who's here, you know why you're here, you know the cause, you know where the money's going. But there's a whole load of positivity as well as obviously the negativity. And the positivity for us is that we can have ideas and we can write to people and ask them, will you help us? And you know, we couldn't do the fanzine, we couldn't do the books, we couldn't do gigs like this without asking. But we tend to ask our favourite people. So I was on the bus coming in thinking, God, I'd love just to be going to this, but I can't. But if that's my biggest problem, life's not bad. But you know, it means so much to us that we get the talented people who are busy, who write first and then who perform at events like these. So we will be having music tonight. We'll be having the chats with some extremely interesting people, and then we'll be having the punk raffle. And I have to make things a little bit clear about the punk raffle, because every time I do something, people think that it's something else. And someone said, oh, the punk raffle, I know what you're going to do. You're going to sell all the tickets, and then you'll give all the prizes to people who didn't buy the tickets. I thought, what kind of twisted minds do people have? But, so there will be a raffle, and the raffle is for punk items. So we've got a test pressing of the last Ruts album, which I think is a masterpiece. There's a test pressing. Look, there's 5 of those in the world, and thanks to the Ruts DC for donating that. We've got a prongs prize pack, which is hard to say. We have a totally one-off bundle of CDs from Stano. It's his collected works of Stano. We have a very limited edition run of posters commemorating the life and work of Philip Chevron, who you will know from the Radiators and from the Pogues. And we also have a signed book, brilliant book by Patrick Frayne, who wrote in the previous book. And so the raffle tickets, to make it easy, they're €1 each. I almost said £1. So they're €1 each, or £1, we'll take your pounds. And if you want to buy 5, it's €5. If you want to buy 10, it's 10. So it's now kind of funny, if you buy 27, it's 28. So they're £1 each. So there's no bulk discount. So we're absolutely delighted. The work that Tony has been doing recently is very, very striking. It's not music that's designed to do anything except hit you in the soul, and we're delighted that Tony is on in the show. So please give it up for Tony St. Ledger. Everyone for coming out. My name's Michael Murphy, and I worked on this project with my friend Niall McGurk. These projects, putting the book together, putting the fanzine together, putting this event together tonight, like there's a fair bit of chaos and there's organisation, and I tend to bring the chaos, so thanks to Niall for making everything happen. You know, like anyone who's here, you know why you're here, you know the cause, you know where the money's going. But there's a whole load of positivity as well as obviously the negativity. And the positivity for us is that we can have ideas and we can write to people and ask them, will you help us? And you know, we couldn't do the fanzine, we couldn't do the books, we couldn't do gigs like this without asking. But we tend to ask our favourite people. So I was on the bus coming in thinking, God, I'd love just to be going to this, but I can't. But if that's my biggest problem, life's not bad. But you know, it means so much to us that we get the talented people who are busy, who write first and then who perform at events like these. So we will be having music tonight. We'll be having the chats with some extremely interesting people, and then we'll be having the punk raffle. And I have to make things a little bit clear about the punk raffle, because every time I do something, people think that it's something else. And someone said, Oh, the punk raffle, I know what you're going to do. You're going to sell all the tickets and then you'll give all the prizes to people who didn't buy the tickets. I thought, what kind of twisted minds do people have? But, so there will be a raffle, and the raffle is for punk items. So we've got a test pressing of the last Ruts album, which I think is a masterpiece. There's a test pressing. Look, there's 5 of those in the world, and thanks to the Ruts DC for donating that. We've got a prongs prize pack, which is hard to say. We have a totally one-off bundle of CDs from Stano. It's his collected works of Stano. We have a very limited edition run of posters commemorating the life and work of Philip Chevron, who you will know from the Radiators and from the Pogues. And we also have a signed book, brilliant book by Patrick Frayne, who wrote in the previous book. And so the raffle tickets, to make it easy, they're €1 each. I almost said £1. So they're €1 each, or £1. We'll take your pounds. And if you want to buy 5, it's €5. If you want to buy 10, it's 10. So it's now kind of funny. If you're buying 27, it's 28. So they're £1 each. So there's no bulk discount. So we're absolutely delighted. The work that Tony has been doing recently is very, very striking. It's not music that's designed to do anything except hit you in the soul, and we're delighted that Tony is on in the show. So please give it up for Tony St. Ledger. For panel number 1. Absolutely. Here's how we'll do this. I'm just going to kind of throw a question that is an open invitation to chat about music, or how you got into music, or what your passion is, or where it led you. But again, whenever I get a microphone, there's probably going to be some kind of apology. So the first apology is to Stu, because he's one of the 3 panelists tonight who were meant to be in the fanzine, but I lost their documents. They're somewhere, but they're not in the fanzine, but they'll be coming out. And I know it's no consolation, but I also lost, I haven't told Niall the name because it's too shameful. Someone who had a #1 album in England sent in a heartbreaking piece, and it's in a folder somewhere on my computer, but I don't know where it is. So that's not in. So there's a really, really great unpublished fanzine somewhere in here. But Stu, some of you will know Stu Daly from his band Chewing on Tinfoil, who are now Chewy, and if you've seen them, there's no point in me saying anything about them. They're a force of nature. So Stu has a solo album coming out this week, so we're delighted to have you. So Stu, how did you get into music, and what motivates you, and how did you go from being a fan, where were you buying your records, to being on stage?
Yeah, I got into music because I'm really crap at sports. Terrible hurling, not good at football. So it was really one or the other in the generation that I grew up with. And yeah, it was literally that's how a lot of people express themselves through so many different ways. And I kind of fell into music, as what people my age were doing at the time. There was no one in my family played music. I found out not so long ago that my great uncle was a banjo teacher, taught a lot of my uncles and stuff. So it was could have been helpful growing up, but no, they let me suffer. They let me struggle through the D chord and the G chord. Yeah, and it was pretty much that. It was just how did you pass your time if you weren't going to football on a Saturday? You were going and looking at records, and then after that it was all ages gigs. From the age of 15 to 17 and a half. So it was going out to, at the time it was Bray and Greystones, Rosie Gallagher's, Paddy's Hall. As far as I was concerned, I was going to a different planet, because I'd never gone that far in the dart. But yeah, and it was just about that, and then obviously eventually you're it's not enough to what you want to participate in. Yeah, and I just pretty much wreaked havoc on all my friends ever since.
And that Wicklow scene was really, really rich, and it it was young people. Sam McGrath wrote a great piece in one of our earlier books. Dylan Haskins, wrote stuff for us in the past. Like, did it matter to you that you were a young person and it was other young people that were putting on the gigs? It wasn't some publican. No offence to Mr. Whelan, some publican who was looking for your money. Like, did that make an impression on you?
Yeah, absolutely. It made it empowering. Made it seem possible. I guess, you see other people doing it, and then it becomes like, I guess I can do that. I guess I can put on a gig, And then, as you said, there's bands like, you see like Kid Blunt put out like albums and stuff. You're like unbelievable stuff. But it was like, oh no, they just did it themselves. They didn't need, permission. They didn't need anyone else's money. Fantastic stuff.
And then, when did you start going to gigs in town, or being aware that the DIY scene in Ireland wasn't just a couple of people doing stuff, that it was kind of part of a global, non-organised organisation?
Yeah, and I guess it's that. It was like, so I was like, I feel born in was at an age and at the right time, whereas like the internet was in its, to me, infancy. So yeah, you were using message boards like Tump and stuff like that. You were seeing like, oh, there's a band from Cork that are playing, in Paddy's Hall or something like that, and then that's how you kind of like figured out the network. And then it was like everyone else, you'll put them on a gig, then they'll kind of put you on a gig or stuff. We did run some in Tala and Albon Community Centre, and they were bad gigs, but loads of fun. People kept pulling the fire alarm. but yeah, so, and that's it. You build up that network of like, cool, we'll put you on, we'll lose money, you'll put us on, you can lose money, we'll all lose money together. And that was it. That's how you're like, oh, there is a network here, and we'll all just help each other out.
And so you learned how to lose money by putting on gigs, but then another great way to lose money is to be in a band. Like, when did you first form bands?
I guess I've only ever been really into like it's the only band, the first band I ever played in was 21 years now. So yeah, I was 16. That was a band. I was like, right, this is it, and then it was now.
And then in terms of records, in terms of your music taste, like what records were you buying, or have some records been put in the back of or CDs, been put away, or the ones that you bought early that kind of got the fire going in you that you still go back to? Are there any special albums or singles that?
Yeah, I guess there's two. I worked so I was young, I was punk. I worked in that shop fresh across from Eager Beaver in Temple Bar. If you've ever shopped there, I probably sold you your badges, scowling all the while. And then, but I always worked there. So the people who owned that shop, they were first wave into punk music, and so they had their CD collection was just there for me. So I guess the age that I was, it was Rancid, it was Operation Ivy. And they were like the big albums for me, and then they were like, Operation Ivy obviously were like a second wave or kind of late third wave ska punk band. They're like, oh, you might like the specials, and I was like, no, they put on the first special album. I was like, alright, well, this is the perfect album. So it was probably that first specials album for me. It was just like, yeah, still the best thing ever to be recorded,
Couldn't argue with that. And it's really difficult now because there's so much traffic for Irish bands to get any kind of leverage abroad. But you're one of those bands that have. Was that through DIY, or did something happen that allowed you to build up a fairly substantial fan base across the water? How did that happen?
That's very nice you'd say that. I guess it was just slogging it, just going, sleeping on floors, playing to no one, playing slightly less than no one, year on year. Just again, with making the same relationships that we made here, just over there, putting on bands from like a lot of our friends from Bristol, from London, they'll come over, we'll put them on. The other thing is we were relentless in annoying any American band who came over this side to let us support them. Just constantly, we just wear them down, just keep at them. They'll run out of excuses eventually, and then you'll support them. And then like that way you'll be in front of a promoter, and they'll be like, I know they can turn up on time. They'll play a 30-minute set though. You know what I mean? I guess over there I find we're like maybe a little exotic or something. I don't know, that's probably a weird thing to say, but yeah, I think that helped.
And so the Specials' first album, and then any gigs that have really stayed in your memory?
Oh, yeah. There was, like you mentioned, kind of Dylan Haskins, so when he used to put on gigs in Dean's Grange, I think it was, and he got Lemuria and Ringers to play, and yeah, Lemuria are really cool, but I didn't really know Ringers too well, but they're kind of in that kind of, they sound a little bit like Rancid, but I thought they were fantastic, but it was that time where I was seeing people who were a fair bit older than me coming in to Dublin, playing in a suburban kitchen, but having a great time playing like fantastic music, not making loads of money, but like that was never the point. But like, and I'd already kind of obviously come to that kind of conclusion, but it was lovely to be like, alright, so this is never going to bring any sort of money to me, but it's going to bring experiences that I couldn't have any other way, you know. And again, you're making these new kind of very deep kind of connections with people that you otherwise wouldn't meet. So yeah, it was that standing in the kitchen being like, this is weird. It's, you know, this is kind of normal for me now, but this should be weird for them, and it isn't. So I was like, yeah, I want to do that.
What a positive note to leave on it. You know, I could talk to everyone for much longer, and please do, you know, you're meeting the panelists, you know, please support them, go to their gigs, buy their records. But thanks a million, Stuart. Britain probably knows everyone here. You know, John, first thing that made me know John was cool was when he named his band after an orange juice B-side. So that's really cool. But John, in addition to being in SAC, you know, in addition to kind of keeping Irish, interesting, innovative rock music going, has also, you know, is the spearhead behind Goo magazine. So there's lots of things we could talk to you. But again, like, where did the early moments of I like music more than my friends, or I'm crap at hurling, so I better get into music?
I suppose my dad was in a band when he was a teenager, and he played skiffle music, which was all the rage back in the mid-50s. Lonnie Donegan, Rock Out and Line and stuff like that. And he was in a band called the Louisiana Five, and they were All-Ireland skiffle champions in 1957. They won it in what was called the 4 Ps back then, the 4 provinces, which was the TV club then it became, and now it's gone. But he played the box bass, which was the T-chest with a pole and 1 string and a washboard. So we had all those Lonnie Donegan 78s at home, so we used to listen to a lot of them, you know, but also a lot of show tunes as well. Like I'm a big fan of Singing in the Rain and West Side Story and all that kind of stuff. So, and then then the Beatles albums came in, the red and the blue one that they bought, and you know, start getting into that. But so yeah, I suppose like we're actually still in the work called the Louisiana 7 now. My dad's 85, and yeah, we're still looking for gigs. We played the Electric Picnic loads of times, and my brother's the drummer, and my sister sings as well. So just like it's kind of like the Von Trapp family, do skiffle, you know. But so yeah, that's, I suppose, got a bit of them. Did lick it up off the ground, you know. But myself then, I suppose we would have been 14, 1979, and 15, 80 when ska came along, and we were all mad into the Specials and two-tone and stuff like that, you know. My first gig that I ever went to was the Beat and the Specials in the Stardust in 1981. So that's forever etched into my memory, of course. What an amazing show that was, and what a horrible tragedy it was then a few weeks later. But yes, like, I don't know, I just always felt that I could write songs, you know. Like, I started playing guitar quite late, you know, in my teens, and entirely self-taught, and I suppose lucky my brother was the drummer in the band, and all our mates, our gang was the band, you know what I mean? So it was self-contained. We didn't have to look for people or whatever, or put ads in any or papers or in any rehearsal spaces. So we've kind of gone through that now. Myself and my brother are the only ones from the original lineup still there, but you know, that continued on. So yeah, we just started. Our first gig would have been down in the local hall in Lorcan Estate, and then the school hall, which I think Mr. McGurk used to go to as well. Like there used to be bands like the Models and DC9 and all are from that area as well, so they would have played there. So you'd be looking up at them, kind of gunning to get up yourself, you know. So that was a great environment to grow up in. I remember going to see Neil 18 in the Magnet before they became Aslan, and I used to get the bus. I started working in the Irish Times then as a messenger boy first of all, and then kind of worked my way up a bit. But used to go to Rathfarnham, the 16 from Beaumont, out to Rathfarnham in every Thursday to see Otto de Fay, and just old bands like that, you know. Just like the Irish scene is nothing what it is now, of course, but I mean, you still have brilliant bands, you know. So then we just started up ourselves and we did the school hall as well, and then I think we played a place in Stony Batter, a pub there, and then the Ivy Rooms, of course, and then the Underground, then the Bagot, and that was the circuit, the New Inn and Charlie's and all that kind of jazz, you know.
Now, for young people, the Bagot was where the big bands played. Most of us stayed Ivy Rooms or Underground. So I love that image of the Irish skiffle Von Trapp family. but where were you going and pulling on for your influences when you started doing that circuit of the Ivy Rooms to the Underground to the Bagot?
I suppose I started getting into all the postcard bands from Glasgow and stuff like that, like Aztec Hammer, Orange Juice, all that kind of stuff, you know, and start getting into the Velvet Underground and Love and all, who were obviously big influences on that style of songwriting as well. So the kind of jangly guitar, indie, wearing the suits and the exotic ties and the head shaved up the side, all that kind of jazz, you know. So that's where our first kind of, we named ourselves after Northern Shoes B-side, Lord John White and the Bottleneck Train, and then there was way too many words to get on a poster, so we dropped the Bottleneck Train. So yeah, that was it. And then of course we had a major crash coming back from a gig in Cork, and I was given last rites on the side of the road, in hospital for 2 years, blah blah blah. So that kind of took the sting out of that. And then when we kind of got going again, we called ourselves SAC. So that was the beginning of that journey.
And that's a journey that's still going on, and you haven't stopped innovating, you haven't stopped, you know, making interest in music. And you know, John's just back from playing with Echo and the Bunnymen over in Butlins in England. But going back to that early underground Ivy Rooms days, like, did you have a manager? You had a really good profile, you were well respected. Were you doing that on your own, or was someone helping you, or?
We were doing it on our own for a good bit. Well, actually, Kieran Owens was managing us, a guy called Paul Webb was managing us for a while, and then we had the crash, and then we were gone so long. And then a friend of ours, Ken Binley, do you know Ken? He worked with the Waterboys. He was managing us for a while, and then Kieran Owens took over and suggested the name change. He was managing Sinead O'Connor, of course, and Fountainhead, was it? He was managing. But Cattell Koenig, yeah, so he was great, you know. But then we moved to we recorded a demo. This would have been 1992, I think. We recorded a demo, and we were kind of back managing ourselves then. He'd given up actually because his brother died. Do you remember in the sea? He was Kieran was the proprietor of a thing called the Dublin Event Guide, which is kind of precursor to the Goo magazine, but it was a Dublin events free sheet back in the time when there was no internet, so it really was the Bible, wasn't it? But so Kieran, when his brother died, Kieran went headlong into that, so he stopped managing us. But we recorded a demo, and there was a song, What Do the Christians Ever Do For Us, on it, and we went to London. We kind of got about 60 copies printed up, cassette, and you know, in Dublin then we said, right, you're going to pick W1, you'll pick the Soho area, and we divided them up and went around with our packages had the band photo, the press release, all on paper of course, and then the cassette, and hand delivered them, and we got one response, and it was from an indie label called Lemon Records that the Pair of Dreams were already on, so they put out the single then, Christians, and it was single of the week in Enemy and Melody Maker. So that got us off to a flying start in the UK, and we start getting phone calls from bigger labels like Nude and stuff like that. But because we were managerless, we kind of said, "Oh no, we're sticking with these guys." Now they ran out of money. It wasn't a great decision in retrospect, but anyway, when you're doing it, you're kind of, that's all you're thinking about. So we moved to London in 1994, and we had a great year there. We were living in Camden, and we shared an office with Blur's management, and we'd be down in the Good Mixer playing pool with them. And then every Tuesday after Top of the Pops, we'd go to the Green Man pub, where all the bands would go, Pulp and Elastic and all them bands and all. So we were just, having a great time, gigging as well, doing a lot of stuff. But it was the Brit pop movement was really big, and the cool Britannia movement with Tracy Emin and all that kind of stuff. And so it was hard being an Irish band to kind of get beyond that. Like we shared a lot of gigs with Compulsion, remember Jack Knife Lee and stuff like that. But they found it the same as well, So we came back to Dublin, and we met Shane O'Neill from Dirt Records and recorded an album with him, and Jack Knife Lee produced that as well, and so we just came on from there,
And great sounding, like all your stuff sounds great. But just fast forward to, and you mentioned the Dublin Event Guide, which had brilliant writing, and there was nothing else like it, and as you said, there was no other way it might be the only way you'd find out about a gig.
Yeah.
And so the Goo, that's an ambitious thing, and you've kept going with it. Like, where did the idea come from, and how is it even possible for you to maintain it?
I suppose it came about during lockdown, really, because I was the bookings manager in the Grand Social. I started up the Grand Social, so I would have been bookings manager there for about 10 years, and then I moved to Bloody Mary's, which was a new venue there. That was brilliant, but then COVID hit, of course, and I found out Bloody Mary's wasn't going to reopen, so I was kind of like, right, what am I going to do? And then no one was doing anything at the time, so I was just thinking, and it was only, I remember one time my brother, the gigs had started back, and Gorillaz had played in the Tree Arena, and he put up a post, and loads of people were saying, jeez, didn't even know they were on. And I was thinking, if a band like Gorillaz aren't getting to their fan base and all, like, something fundamentally wrong here. And I think, obviously, when digital media came out, like Facebook and all, it was a big source of information and all. Now it's starting to get very muddy and murky, and I mean, you can see by your Facebook feed that, like, everyone's disappearing, you know what I mean? But you're buried under the ads. So I just thought, like, well, I used to write for the Event Guide as well, of course, for years. So I always have kind of had that journalistic thing within me, or I think I do. But I just thought that it just seems like a good opportunity. People were buying vinyl again, and there just seemed to be a return. People wanted something tangible to hold in their hand. I just thought Dublin needed something like that. Since the Event Guide had gone, even all the newspapers were getting rid of all their listings and even reviews and all. Like, I think we're probably the only magazine now that does single reviews. I don't think anyone else does them. I'm not sure, are we? Have you been reviewed by anyone else?
You're the only one to reply to me anyway.
Right, okay. Well, I'm hearing now that other magazines, I won't mention it, it's one in print, but are actually, you can't get an album review unless you pay for it, which is just, I can't believe that. It's madness. But anyway, so I just seen the gap there and went for it. And I asked, I think Niall was one of the first person, because I had it in my mind that I didn't want to be just another, like, hot press or just covering popular indie kind of music, I knew there was a great punk scene starting to emerge. I was good friends with Aaron, who does the metal column. I know everyone, the jazz scene was burgeoning. Classical has always done well, it's always well funded, of course, as well. So I thought, like, why not have a magazine that's represented? So I just approached everyone who is an expert in their field, and they all said, yeah, they'd love to do it, And then, up here, I think there's 5 or 6 members of the GU here, actually, lurking in amongst you. But everyone's amazing, and just shows you how passionate people still are about music.
Fantastic, and again, lovely way to end. And And thanks for the goo. So John, thanks very much. Start buying records or listening to music or being aware that music was something that you had a deep passion for.
Pretty hard to follow these two, all of their accomplishments, and it's great to hear. Thanks for having us. My first album wasn't cool at all. I was about 5 years old and it was an ABBA album, and I had a little record player in my bedroom and I played it over and over and over and over again. And I think, but that was it. But I think really for me it was when my family moved to Ireland in 1980. I was 7, and we moved to a little town called Trim. So my dad moved over and his younger brother moved over. And Trim was quite small, we'd moved from North London, and I guess there wasn't a whole lot to do. So my dad and his brother formed a band, and we had a little 4-track at home, a drum kit, a couple of guitars, a keyboard, then a piano, and a lot of stuff like that. So they were writing and sending off music to radio stations, and I think they got one song played by Larry Gogan once. So I was kind of familiar with, the battle for indie musicians, to get a bit of recognition. So this is back in the 80s. So my dad ran a couple of gigs, sounds kind of similar here, in the town hall in Trim. So I want you sort of to picture Trim. It was about 4,000 people, incredibly pretty, beautiful castle, lovely river, but not a whole lot going on Sundays apart from mass and day drinking. So not a whole lot going on for young people. So he ran all day, all age gigs in the town hall. So we had local bands playing. So there was one in particular I had a massive crush on the guitarist, which has been a lifelong scourge for me, really. But this guy called Ken Gillick, I'm sure he's not here, so I'm probably safe enough. And I'm sure he's married to someone else by now. But there's a band called Child's Play, and they just did covers. And then my dad's band went on, and that went on for a little while until it got stopped. But Trim in the 70s had a huge music scene, with show bands. But in the 80s, I think with the recession, there wasn't a whole lot happening. So I suppose that was, my kind of journey into music and listening to indie music and smaller gigs as well. Because I, in general, would struggle being in crowds, and I find I get a bit, I don't pay attention to the music if I'm in a big room with crowds, so I prefer smaller gigs. So that's it really, for me.
But so it was the idea of people in the house making music, trying to be heard. You were a first-hand witness of that.
Yeah.
So it was. Then when did you go to buying? No offense to Trim, but when did you go to buying records or kind of generating your own taste? Curating your own.
Again, I think it came from kind of going to gigs. I think one of the first proper gig I went to was Meatloaf. I saw him in a nightclub in Drogheda. So again, small gig, but it was absolutely packed. It was boiling hot. So I think it was 1989 or 1990, so I was 16, I think. I got crushed up at the front and pulled out, but it was that was an amazing gig. So that was really what informed what I started buying, was going to gigs and seeing the music. And it was always through meeting people and getting to know them, and then that music meant a little bit more to me, I saw Horselips. I think that was the second gig I saw. I was in Beachmount in Navan. And then the next gig, I got an album and got it signed, and it sort of meant a lot more. So it was never it was just what music was available, what was local. I've got loads of cassettes of bands, they probably just made one little 4-track cassette, and I've got those in a box somewhere, so it was just, that was my interest. And I suppose growing up in Trim at that time, when I'm Church of Ireland, but I joined the Legion of Mary because there was so little to do, and it was they had great events, and they always had gigs on, so it was fun. So I don't know, the first proper gig I went to was in the Top Hat in Dunleary, and I went with a few people from Trim. Again, one of them is the bass player for the Buck Chow now with Lolo Wood, so we're still friends, and I'm actually in a music video with him when he was playing the bass in 1993 or so. So I got into a few videos with indie bands, so if you can find them on YouTube. So I went to see Faith No More and met up with a group of people that I met because my best friend wrote her name and address on a £5 note, and I arranged to meet them there. So it was, they ended up in Trinity as well, so that was like, oh, another story. But that was sort of my journey into music, and I have a very eclectic. So I play the piano. My daughter plays the piano. My son's a DJ in Cyprus. It's, you know, so there's kind of music. Everyone's got a
So the
finger
home,
in.
yeah, so the home studio in Trim
Yeah.
has, you know, brought 3 generations of music to you. But you mentioned Trinity, like, did you get, because student unions were often a way for a lot of people to get involved with the music industry. They were pure DIY before the major concert promoters took over events like the Trinity Ball. But were you involved at any stage when you were in Trinity with music?
I was, but I have to say a lot of it's a bit of a blur. I was there. I was the welfare officer in Trinity Student Union for a year, and I was on the Trinity Ball committee. But I had responsibility for the garden party, so kind of upmarket, you know. But yeah, so I got to see a lot of bands then. And I mean, Buttery Friday nights were amazing. It was really good fun.
And then broadcasting becomes. How did you get into broadcasting?
Well, this was again kind of came to COVID, a bit like John. I was made redundant in June in 2020, and I was like, what am I going to do with my time, you know? And I'd been doing some music promotion for just some people I knew, and getting in touch with radio stations. So I was talking to, there's a guy in Dundalk FM called Paddy Mack who plays 3 indie tracks every morning. So I got talking to him, and he said, well, why don't you come in and co-host the breakfast show with me? And I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything else. And I did a broadcasting course with Dundalk FM, and kind of grew from there. So I'm on a bit of a break at the moment from Dublin City FM, because I work full time. Like a lot of people who are involved in music and broadcasting, you have a day job, so you have this sort of like Superman shirt for music and broadcasting and journalism. And so I'm studying it right as well. So I'm just doing a little bit on Freedom FM on Sunday mornings. So it's from 8 till 12. And it's 90s and noughties. If anyone has any 90s or noughties indie music they would like to have played on the radio station, please send it in, because we can do it. If you want to do an interview, you get in touch. So that's like where we are at the moment.
Sounds like a crossover with the Goo. It's just waiting to happen there. Well, next week on Wednesday, Louise will be doing her own panel on people who joined the Legion of Mary because it sounded like great fun. It'll be followed by a novena.
Just anything to get on stage, even if it's giving out the rosary, you know.
So, thank you so much. So, beside you is Frida Hughes. I met Frida Hughes when I put on an event in my school out in Dunleary on the artwork of punk, and Frida got up at the end and just talked about how there's a lack of spaces for young people to express themselves, to put on the kind of events they want to. And I realised, that's the Frida that does Posterfish promotion. So what's your story in terms of getting involved with music and keeping that lifelong passion?
I suppose, like a bit like Stu, I was absolutely brutal at sport, and a bit like John and Louisa, I had a little bit of family influence. So I came from a very working class background, but both my parents were quite involved in the kind of crowd revival. They didn't play, they were just mad into going to stuff. So I would have grown up going to like Balsadare Festival and a lot of stuff like that. And then I had an uncle who lived in Christiania in Copenhagen, which was a big like squatted kind of a town within Copenhagen, and that's actually my middle name. I'm not Christian, I'm just Frida Christiania. And then we had another, my dad's cousin, who was a New Age traveller, which there weren't many in the 80s in Ireland. So he's settled up in Keju now for a long time. But we were kind of lucky in that we had this little window into a slightly more alternative Ireland that, for our age, like as very, very small children, was quite unusual. And the folks fell apart, whatever, all of the rest. But we grew up in a caravan right in front of our school, which was put you in an odd place, as you can imagine. So not the most popular, and definitely not good at sport. And then, hit teenage years, and the only thing to do if you wanted to go out and listen to music was go to the local GAA disco, which was shite. Like, really bad. Like, really, really bad. There's some good 90s dance music, it didn't get played there. It was terrible. And the whole thing was you'd go and, like, I didn't. No, I was very good. Go and see how many people could shift in one night. You know? And top them up on Monday and go, did you? Oh no, I got 10. Do you know what I mean? So that just wasn't really my cup of tea, because whatever about the crack, the music was crap. So for me, as I said to Niall during the week, it's always been about making space, or finding space for kind of underground culture and different kind of subcultures to flourish. So at the age of 14, I got my hands on the keys to this recently renovated lodge. Like, it was an old kind of a lodge house, and the Historical Society or something had taken it on, done it up. I got the keys, said I was letting a few bands in to practice, and started doing a monthly gig. And we were all teenagers. I was probably the youngest, but I had the keys, so I was like, ah. So it was great. We had like the oldest guy involved was like a lad who was doing sound engineer in Ballyfermot, and he was in his first year. So he got into a desk and he used to do sound for us. Like, so it was a case of like no social media back then, no mobile, so just ringing around on the house phone, word of mouth, got to know people. And it was good. It became a monthly thing. It was a little bit sedate the first few months we did it, and then we had a band called Dysfunctional, right? Which was two of the lads in that band are two of my best friends still today. Well, close friends. We're all still good friends. So Ian Lynch from Lancome was in that band, and one of my closest friends ever, Edward Costello, right? And this was their band. They were called Dysfunctional. They were a mad, screaming, roaring punk band, just total anarcho-punk. And like, if I was 14, they were about 15, 16, do you know what I mean? And we all thought we were the shit, like. So, kind of that opened the door then to punk. Because as I say, kind of lucky growing up with the trad revival stuff, and then folks would have been into a lot of blues, a lot of rock and roll, good record collection at home, like. Never had a fucking penny, sorry for cursing, never had a penny to be buying many records myself. But yeah, kind of got involved with the lads. Then they introduced me to the Dublin punk scene. So like, I would have hung out in town a bit anyways on the weekends, but then we started moving from Central Bank up to the Boathouse in Stephen's Green and meeting all the older punks and like, oh my god, all these bands. And I think in 1997 I either didn't get into the Chinaman for Running Riot's first ever Dublin gig, or else I was too busy snogging somebody outside. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. But either way, really, really wanted to see them. So I saw them the following year in March. I think it was in Slattery's with Steam Pig and Stagnation, who's Trevor McLeod's band at the time. And the Steam Pig, the drummer from Steam Pig is currently the drummer in a band I manage now. So it's a bit of continuity there. So saw them, and that would have really kind of opened my eyes to the kind of anti-fascist punk scene and that kind of political side, and coming from a slightly political lefty family anyway, kind of slotted right in. So yeah, we would have been very good friends with like bands like Puget Sound. They were just like, we were all buddies, we were all the same age, literally exact same age. So seeing them coming up the ranks was amazing, and seeing them supporting like Strict 90C and bands like that, we're like, oh my god, like this is great, you know. So that would have been the soundtrack of my teenage years, really. And if there's one record that I really, really wish I still had, and I do not know where it went, it was Puget Sound's first ever release, the Hansel and Gretel EP. Yeah. I don't have it. Don't know what happened to it with them. So that's one I really wish I still had. So I suppose from there it was always about creating space, trying to find venues that would do alternative stuff, that would let you do something on the DIY. It wasn't all about profit. Often doing stuff for fundraisers or to raise money for somebody trying to put out an EP or whatever. So I could talk forever. You ask me again.
No. I think we could all listen to that. No, she's not finished. That was just one sentence. The night is long. No, but what's fascinating is, you know, your cultural background, and then you meet these people who are, you know, who would have looked like punks, you know, the lads from Lynch, you know, who become Lancome, you know, they sound like punks, but then they're totally immersed, like that they're scholars of hundreds of years of Irish traditional music that makes sense to you. And then you see that music has a political dimension when you start getting into do it yourself. How far can that take you? Like, can that give you a career, or were you happy thinking, no, we just want to do it completely uncompromised, or did you feel a little bit cut off from the mainstream, or were you happy to be away from it?
To be honest, generally pretty happy to be away from it. We were always trying to do something a bit different. And, you know, I think back in the 90s and early 2000s, things were more niche. You had like your various different, you had your punks, your goths, your indie heads. There wasn't as much kind of blurring as there is now, where young people are kind of mixing and matching a lot, which is great. So I guess people could get a bit siloed in scenes or whatever. And I suppose we all kind of came up together, learning bits off each other and all the rest. I would have got into doing bits of drum and bass gigs, you know, working, helping with promotion or doing the door gigs like that. Eventually, I suppose over the years, I ended up running gigs in a space called Shomer Spree. I have a big kind of, actually, is that water there? Yes. Thank you, sir. I have a big interest in I suppose just kind of, again, like finding spaces like that. So the big thing was like, the city was very, very confined by licensing laws. I would have got involved in the Give Us the Night campaign at the beginning, but again, I wasn't a big money-making venue, so I kind of went, I have a bit to give, but you know what, there's people in there that are going to get their foot in the door better than me, so it wasn't something I stayed involved with, but they're great, fair play to them. But I suppose with Shamrock Spray, it was an anarchist social centre, and they were, the collective had been around for years, but they'd been in this Belvedere Court building for quite a while. It was probably the best building they had, really, but they just couldn't pay the rent. It wasn't a squatted building, but it was low rent. So I was running a couple of venues, running bookings for venues, that kind of thing. I ran another promotions thing called Sounds of Resistance, which was all anti-fascist fundraisers as well. So they asked me, look, will you come in and run some nights here? So Post Fish came in and started running the late night things, and we kind of established it as a late night music venue then. And then it went on to become Jigsaw, which has since been a thing. But I suppose when you talk about the political nature of, I mean, there's a whole political side to finding spaces, keeping spaces, who, you know, if you're funded, you're essentially muzzled to an extent by your funding and the kind of stipulations of that. But the other political aspect to this, suppose, to putting on gigs that came along for me was growing up in a caravan, but also my grandmother had been like itinerant, not Irish traveller, but itinerant stock for generations. So we always had really, really close connections with Irish travellers. Like the Halton site down the road from us were the nearest caravan, so we were all friends. So I suppose grew up with a lot of travellers, and I always felt like traveller musicians just don't get the respect that they deserve. They just don't, and they don't get paid the way they should. So I just said, look, this is something I want to do. So I wanted to put on gigs with Irish traveller musicians. So I started trying to find a venue. 15 venues said no because it was travellers. One took the booking, and then called me the next day and went, will there be real travellers at the event? No, Parborough cut it. I was like, what's that? Do you know what I mean? So the Cobblestone, of course, mad sound, took us on, no bother, and we ran things called a celebration of traveller music there, which was essentially trying to give young traveller musicians a leg up, and some that were older traveller musicians but who never maybe played for money in that kind of setting before. So they were pretty good, and we don't do the gigs on the Cobblestone so much anymore, but we do a big thing with the Smithfield Flow once a year, which is like all traveller musicians kind of playing together. And we've taken the gigs around the country a bit, we've linked with other traveller groups down the country and stuff like that. So that would be another sort of part of the politicisation of the kind of music work I've done as well, I guess.
Yeah, and again, you know, as I said, you could talk all night and we could listen all night, but, you know, thank you so much to Frida. And hence that DIY impulse. And Aoife O'Leary is a film composer, was a member of the Hope Collective, is an incredible vocalist as well. And Aoife, like, how did it start for you? Like, how did you start taking music seriously or find it as a source of inspiration?
Well, thank you, first of all. And it was in my family. My parents were big music fans. And then I have two brothers and a sister, and we're all musical. And we've all been in bands, and we've all done all these things. And at a certain point in time, I think, once I hit kind of 12, 13, 14, I wasn't confident anymore. And even though I had sung at home, I didn't feel like singing was something that I could do. So I wanted to sing, I wanted to be in bands, I wanted to do all this stuff, but I just didn't think it was possible. So, and then somehow I wound up being part of the Hope Collective. I was telling Niall about this earlier on, and all of a sudden, at a time in my life that wouldn't have been the happiest, I found something that made me so happy. And it was part of all of us working together on music and all the bits and pieces that came with it, like everything from putting on bands or booking shows or having bands come to stay and all these kind of things. And I loved it. So for me, I just loved it so much. I loved that we were all doing that. I loved how happy the gigs made the people who came to them. I loved that bands got to play in a place that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. And I think at the time we had put on Bikini Kill, and I was telling Niall as well, Month of Birthdays was another one of my favourites. And these were like bands with kick-ass small women. And not that there's anything wrong with tall women. I happen to be small. So it kind of was I think something was seeded in me. Not even, that's what I want. I was still far away from that. But something like, whoa, that looks cool. And the Month of Birthday show was so intense and fueled and like charged and all the rest of it. And I was just watching it going, wow, how cool that they get to do that. Anyway, I feel like that's somehow seeded in me, what if I could even though I couldn't consciously think it, it was like, so anyway, gradually that evolved to, well, if I could, what would I do now as a next step? And so then I started taking vocal lessons, and I started like recording ideas for songs, melodies, notes, and I actually did that for a year and deleted them all. And I think what was unusual at the time was I wasn't going, oh, you're an idiot, you'll never get this right, everything you do is crap. I just remember going, yeah, and continuing, because it was just, had some sort of an awareness that this was the long haul for me, that music was my choice. And then ultimately I was singing backing singer in a band, and that my brother had roped me in on at the end of the day, called The Last Post, and they were doing well in Dublin, and they were doing well around Ireland, and then I was saying, well, if you're doing a gig, I want my first one to be in somewhere in Portlaoise where nobody's there in a pub. And it ended up being in the Ambassador Theatre, which was along with playing support for a band called the Reindeer Section, who had members of Mogwai and Sigur Rós and all this Snow Patrol. So of course every musician was at that, and that was my first gig, which was utterly terrifying. And then kind of from that, it was amazing to do, but I realized that if I'm not doing loud, heavy, hard music, I'm not going to be happy. So that's what I did. I created a band, we made some albums, we toured in the States and in Europe. I booked our own tour from my mom's kitchen with the drummer all across the States. And then I ended up in the States staying in people's houses in like Lincoln, Nebraska. Definitely had the shows where we played to nobody, and also had the shows where I played to so many people. It was mind-blowing, but that mostly the shows to nobody. And then people were putting up my band, and they were feeding us like I did for bands previous in Hope. So it was just like this mad full circle moment. And then from then production, and then film composing now, which is crazy.
So the band was the Moth Complex.
Moth
was
Complex.
Okay.
Yeah, Moth Complex.
So how did that form? How did you have a manager, or did you do all of that? Was that pure DIY?
That was all DIY. Start, beginning and end, all of it. Everything from videos and the tours and the promotion and the absolutely every single thing we did ourselves. And I was it was my baby that I was driving it. But I think what happens when you have, and I've seen this with other people, when you have somebody who's so bloody passionate about something like that, they really believe in it and they're pouring their heart and soul into it. People come to that, and it's not necessarily in support. I've seen this in the movies. Last year a couple of years ago now, I scored my first film, and I got to be on set, and I'd never been on a movie set before, and they had rented out for some of the scenes Hoth Castle. So they have you get in and you have to go through security, and it's a whole big rigmarole to even get on the set. And then, but what's electric about it is everybody there is doing what they are absolutely passionate about, like be that the cinematographer or the sound person or the wardrobe people or the people who are organising or moving sets. And so just being in the middle of this, where you have all these creative people who are fired up doing absolutely what they love, was like, whoa. And so I think that's what I felt in Hope. We all loved it, and we were all came together for that creativity. And I think with Moth Complex, it was the same. There were people who were kind of like loved to drum or wanted to do this or want to do this, and we just sort of ended up all together. And so all DIY, start, beginning and end.
Okay, and most people, like me, were in the audience, so we're involved in some way. Some people go into bands, smaller number, but very few of them go on to be film composers. Like, how did you make that move? How did that even happen?
Well, after Moth Complex, I had been living in the States, and I came back home, and I kind of had a big fight and fell out with music for a little while, and I stepped away from it. And then I was kind of tried to learn guitar, which is not my jam, but ended up thinking, well, maybe I'll just do acoustic stuff, and that could be a step back in. And when I was doing all that stuff, I was dependent on other people to work with, and being a little naive, I paid people up front. Months later, nothing's done, all the rest of it. And a friend of mine who I worked with in Moth Complex, he was saying to me, you're going to have to learn how to do this yourself, and it's going to take me 10 years to get in any way decent, or yada yada. Anyway, what happens next? COVID. And I grabbed it and ran with it. All the money that was given, I poured into a home studio, I took courses, I spent all my time studying production. And prior to this, in Moth Complex, I had, over a number of years, worked with a guy who was in film. And he found Moth Complex earlier on, he placed our songs in his TV show. And he'd reach out to me and go, I have a scene where I need this kind of music, or sort of this, and sort of this tempo, and sort of that. Do you have it? So if I had it, I'd send it over to him, and if not, I'd send him somebody who could help. And he'd come to me, or I'd go to him, say, I've worked on something, it sounds like this, if you need it, there you go. So it was very relaxed. And I met him and his wife when they were in Ireland, and I knitted them scarves, and we met up in LA, and so it was all very chill. And after I had worked on production for like 4 or 5 months, less even, I had 2 songs I was feeling happy with, and they were quiet, and so I decided to send them to him. Now literally one day my hands like this over the keyboard, and I couldn't send it. And then the next day I sent them to him, and I said, this is what I'm working on, it's all mine, so you can use whatever you want, and just no pressure. Just if it works, great, and if it doesn't, no problem. And he reached out to me and he said that he liked them, but what was happening was he was working on an action movie with a female assassin character, and he had Antonio Banderas roped in, which for anybody who not roped in, who was acting in it. But so for anybody who's involved in music, it's like that kind of name is incredible leverage, like to be able to get. And for me, I'm in this till my last breath, which I hope is a long way away. So I just want to do music, and I want to connect with people who are of the same kind of vibe, basically. So anyway, so he said to me, I need hard, I need heavy, I need rock, can you do that? And of course I couldn't, and I said, yeah! So I'll have you 2 by the end of next week. And then I had freaked out for like a day, and then for the next week, I mean, there were no showers, there was barely any food, I slept in the clothes that I worked in. I just was obsessed, because my skill was way lower than what he needed. But I think my heart was strong, and I knew how to write songs, and so I was able to structure something melodically enough. And the next week I sent him 3 songs, and the night before I sent them off, I sent them to my co-composer, and he was saying to me, you can't send these. He said, like, the vocals are there, the songwriting is there, but the production isn't advanced enough. And so then I was thinking, what do I do? Like, I send him something that's not good enough, and that's that cut off, or I don't send it, and that's that cut off. So what I kind of came down to was, he needs to trust me, and if he says no, that's okay. And so I sent him this stuff, and I was going, these are beginning demos, these are it's going to be okay if you take anything to be produced. And he took 1 for the end credits, he used a second, and then he used a 3rd song. And then over the coming weeks I sent him music, and I sent him what he was asking for, and he said, would you be interested in composing a score in the not too near future? And I was saying, yeah, of course. The not too near future was 4 months later. 4 months. So in that time I had studied production or composing, and I'd taken out all the books and watched all the master classes and done courses and practiced and stuff. But I was still producing for only a year when I started composing that movie. And so that's kind of how it came about. And I think when I think back on it, I have been making a course called Intro to Scoring to help people who are musicians. Like, this was I never even considered it in my lifetime, because it was so not possible. Like, me winning an Olympic medal for swimming won't happen. And that's what composing was for me, because I can't play any instruments. I can't read music, I can't write music. I trigger stuff with a keyboard and a DAW. So, but I think what happens in life is anything that comes to us comes through relationships. And I think over the years, in the friendship we had, I think I trusted him and he trusted me, and I think he's the sort of person who goes with a feeling. Like, and his feeling was yes, because after that I asked him. He sent me 2 scripts, asked me to choose which one I wanted to do. Unthinkable. That I'm the only person in the world that's happened to, I bet. But and I was reading them going, I want to do both. And not from I want to do both. So but really from my feeling is, but I can't do both. So if I did both, I'd need to bring in somebody we could do an incredible job, and I would know that this was best for the whole thing. Or else I'll just do one on my own and I'll call in support. And so when I talked to him, the person I brought in on it was Jerry, who worked with me in Moth Complex, and we work really well, and we've done this kind of similar vibe of music. And so then we ended up, long story, not so short, but we scored that movie. We scored a second movie, then we auditioned and got a third, and that's in post-production. And the 4th movie that I'm just about to begin started filming in the States last Thursday. If you think of it, can't write music, can't read music, can't play an instrument, and I'm on score number 4, and that is testament to, I suppose, I think it really comes back to you have to love it and be willing to fail and be willing to say yes scared, I reckon. I don't know.
I'll give it up for the 5 panelists.
Tired of treating slowly, like you from me. And one day I realised I'm a boat without sea. Orange leaves under my feet should it warn me that slowly everything's changing. Nobody knows what you're supposed to do. Someone you love has no help. Oh, are you gonna make me go through this alone? Are you gonna make me go through this all on my own?